have quorum. Before we vote on the agenda, I'm going to ask Dylan to introduce our dignitary.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Dr. Schultz from. He's our new district planner, not district, division planner. Put that role before, so.
Yeah.
Back the one we have to go through when we need something from the fed board to certify us every couple of years. It's what we do next year.
I will add on that I've worked with Dagan for quite a while. He was the district planner of Woodbury County, so he has a very knowledgeable background in what's going on, and will be very a good resource for the MPO and for the Federal Highway Administration. Well, thank you. 2018, there goes your guys' money. Up next, we have a vote on approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
So, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. Up next, we have approval of the July meeting minutes.
Move. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. July meeting minutes are approved. Up next, we have the consent and vote on the July financial statement, and I will turn it over to Dylan.
Thank you. The financial statement was included in the packet. We, as we normally do, run this through the finance subcommittee. They reviewed it, the email that they did review it. Move approval.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the July financial statement? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. July financial statements are approved. Next, public comment. Do we have anybody? We do have one person who would like to comment. Please step to the podium, state your name, address the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Home, Policy Committee members. My name is Carol Maher, and I live in downtown Des Moines. I'm a year-round, near-daily bicycle rider. Because of this, I have a keen interest in bike and pedestrian safety. Vulnerable road users who are sometimes forgotten in America's society desire to drive everywhere while holding and looking at your phone, getting there faster than the next guy, and parking right out front for free. I'm here to put a face on the next item on the agenda, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. You'll hear stats and data, see graphs and timelines. It will be snazzy, but don't wait for this plan to be completed. Require action now on a stretch of state highway in unincorporated Polk County that has resulted in 2 fatal pedestrian crashes in the last 6 months. Joshua Laird, age 41, Des Moines, killed on January 29th. Yannette Nathaniel McGang, age 37, Ankeny, killed on July 31st. Both pedestrians, both walking northbound, hit by a southbound car, both blamed for their own deaths by the Polk County Sheriff's Department. Joshua, because he had on dark clothing, Yannette, because it was raining. But crashes are not accidents. There are always reasons why, often road design decisions made decades ago. In this case, a four-lane road with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, no sidewalk, no shoulder, no streetlights. But Iowa DOT will tell you, as they did me, we make decisions based on 10 years worth of data, statistics, and trend, not recent events. But of the 246 crashes in the last 10 years in the corridor, 35% were speed related. And while 20,000 vehicles use that stretch every day, the number of pedestrians must be quite small due to the hostile environment for people on foot. So for 2 of the 3 fatalities over the last 10 years to be pedestrians, vulnerable road users have an outsized impact on fatal outcomes. The Ames office of IDOT will tell you that it's impossible to take immediate temporary measures because it takes a long time, requires a lot of data and planning, and it takes a really long time. I disagree. On April 28, 2022, when Emma Campos was killed on University Avenue in Des Moines, a state highway. The city took immediate measures to make the crossing safer and then followed up with CIP improvements a couple of years later, all by working closely with IDA. So it's not impossible. Where there's a political will, there's a way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Public comment. One online. Does there appear to be anybody else? Next, we have a presentation on the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan update. Gunnar.
We have Mitzi here with our consulting team. She's going to be giving you an overview, and this is starting to get to the point where we're going to be asking your member jurisdictions for votes. I think one of the things we're going to be here today is about a target, a safety target. So I want to make sure that that is on your radar as you listen today, because there will be a point in time in the near future where you'll be asked to adopt the target, whatever that ends up being. Mitzi, I'm ready for you.
Hey, thank you so much. Mitzi Alex with Tool Design, and I'm the project manager for this project. I come to the project with 30 years experience, including 26 in the public sector, and I've worked with MPOs quite a lot in my past. So really happy to be here this afternoon. Thank you. And we're happy to give an update on this project. The main things that we want to cover today are just a general project update so you understand where things are at and what we've completed. We want to talk about goal setting, a target year and an outcome goal, and walk through some of the crash data analysis. Next slide. So really just to get grounded in what we've already been working on and where we're at in the project, we have completed the crash analysis, and now we've completed mapping of the high injury network and a high risk network. I will talk a little bit more about what those are. We have been having some conversations around a potential target goal in year. We've met with the Transportation Safety Committee and Transportation Technical Committee to have discussions around that. We've completed a plan and policy review, which is a scan of all your member communities' plans and policies that relate to roadway safety. We've completed the review, but to augment that, we know we can't get everything out of a review of documents, so we actually conducted interviews with, I believe, all, but we might have missed one of the communities. And then countermeasure toolbox, that is something that we are in the process of building the framework for and some content for that will create resources for your technical staff who might be implementing roadway projects or safety improvements or even maintenance activities. And we've completed a fair amount of engagement with online activities, several community-wide events, but then also going to the member communities for more intimate touch points with each of those communities. We've met with, again, the Transportation Safety Committee and Transportation Technical Committee. Next week, there will be presentation discussion with the Metro Managers group, and we will be developing some additional engagement. In terms of the plan document, we're really just at the stage of having an outline developed for that. We have a bit of content to develop and excited to get some input as we move forward with this. Next slide. Next one. So let's start off with some discussion around goals. This project is part of the federal Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And the purpose of the program is to eliminate or significantly reduce the fatal and serious injury crashes that occur. The MPO needs to set a goal and a target year to achieve that reduction. Member communities who want to participate in requesting funding for implementation will also need to have a resolution of support adopted, matching or being more strict than the goal and the target year. That commitment is actually a requirement of future implementation funding. So that is an important piece for member communities to know and to participate in. Next slide. At a high level, when you look at a 5-year period, we started with the most recent 5-year period of crash data that was complete when we began this program. And that was the 2018 to 2022 data. Again, the 22 data then comes out in 23 after it's been cleaned, verified, and so forth. But over 50,000 total crashes in the Des Moines metro region. 939 of those being fatal or serious injury crashes. We know what modes or what types of travelers were involved in that, and those are laid out for you at the bottom of that table. It's motorists. We separated out motorcyclists from the motorists so you can see that is a pretty significant number within your region. And then a fair number, a lot of pedestrians, 119 and 29 cyclists. Those are the vulnerable road users, by the way, the pedestrians and cyclists. When they experience an impact with force, they are just at a much higher risk of having fatal and serious injury results. Next. So 2 communities that we're aware of who have already adopted a goal and a target year are the city of Des Moines and Dallas County. And they have both adopted a goal to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes by 2040. Next slide. In July, we met with the Transportation Safety Committee to have some discussion around target year and goal, what might be right for this region, and to see if we could get a consensus conclusion from that group with a recommendation of where they could agree might make sense for the region. And following I'd say pretty lengthy and very, very thoughtful discussion, they built consensus around a goal of eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes by the target year of 2045. And when they talked about 2045, they really kind of honed in on that being a nice way to break down the timeline into a 20-year window. If you imagine starting this work, having the plan completed in 2024 and starting with the implementation of this plan in 2025, that doesn't mean that current projects get put on hold, as your prior speaker said. Communities are still doing work out in their out on the streets. But this also breaks down to a reduction of 5 percentage points per year in those fatal and serious injuries. And we really want feedback from this group today on that, and whether there are any initial thoughts on the goal and target year. If you're not ready, well, I'll give you another prompt so we can try to get some feedback.
Please give them 30 seconds so for all this again. When we're closing, I'll comment on that. We've had some discussions about setting the date, and I'm good with 2045. I know Des Moines is probably a little further ahead than the rest of us, because of some of what they've already done. Gives the rest of us a little bit of time. One of my thoughts in early discussions, I was a little worried about trying to set 0 as the goal and what that impact would be. Understanding, though, that it's a vision, that no loss of life is acceptable, that we should strive for 0. I'm good with that number now, with an understanding there are going to be circumstances out of our control. We're probably still going to have fatal crash across the metro for various reasons that we're going to have. So knowing that that's not going to impact our grant funding eligibility in the future, I feel fairly comfortable with vision of 0. Any other comments?
I guess I'll ask a question that relates to, this initiative we're talking about. Is it on city and state streets? Is it federal? Interstates? Part of the reason I ask is because I've been involved in policy initiative at the state legislative level to try to pass a hands-free piece of legislation. And a lot of that, of course, is going to be dictated by the state as opposed to local jurisdiction. So I'm curious how maybe state policy interacts with, the objectives here.
Would you like me to take a shot at responding to that one? Okay. There are all roadway types in the region that contribute to levels of safety or risk. And there are policies at all levels that also contribute to safety or risk. There are certain kind of things that local communities really can't necessarily pass on their own that do make a lot of sense for state level consideration. I think you've just mentioned one, which would be a great example. So I think they're going to all interact at the end of the day. It's going to take multiple approaches to drive these statistics down and have safer streets and roads for all. So policies at the local level, at the regional level, and at the state level might all be needed. Modification or different design standards for state and local and county roads might all be needed. We'll get to a section in this presentation where you start to see some mapping that will help to identify those that hone in on the type of roadways that this group has interaction with in terms of funding, potential interaction.
Okay, but this 5% reduction per year, are we talking about these local roadways? Are we also talking about, 235 and I-35, everything else?
It would include all of them because we're taking the total of those crashes that are fatal and serious injury. It's not all crashes, it's the fatal and serious injury ones. And those numbers do show up in the data.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll speak. I'll emphasize what Len was talking about in regard to the goal. The purity of this is the work is something that we should, if we could say online, it's worth the effort. I don't honestly know if 5% is doable or reasonable or really how to think about that because it's actually. I mean, honestly, I think if we could reduce it by 5% every year, holy hell, let's do it, let's go. But a lot of that's going to be in the details of how we get there and whether we agree with the approach of getting there and what's going to cost you. So I'm very interested in continuing the conversation.
Real quick, will the expectations for local communities be in the area of street design, or could they be in areas such as seatbelt enforcement or other things that could actually have positive impacts on fatal accidents or serious injury accidents? Are cities going to be asked to do specific things or respond to this plan in any specific way?
The plan will identify the crash risk and crash factors that we've researched here that are common in this region specifically. The solutions are likely to be a mix of things that could include enforcement, design standards, but it could also include construction capital projects and modifying the design within those. It could even include maintenance projects and how those are being done. They're lower cost, quicker to implement, or communication strategies too. So communication campaigns. The federal program includes proven safety countermeasures for different types of crash and risk situations. And we have to select from those proven counter safety measures, and it's kind of a menu. So one community might choose one solution that's specific to those types of crashes, and another might choose a different solution, but they do have to fit within those proven safety countermeasures.
Anyone else? Continue.
Okay, so this slide was put together to help to visualize what different target years would mean in terms of percentage point reduction per year. So 2045 is where the Transportation Safety Committee seemed to land. The Transportation Technical Committee had a discussion around this, but didn't really develop like a formal recommendation. 2045 really is the one that suggested it's 5 percentage points per year reduction to reach that target. And it changes slightly up and down, whether you go a shorter timeline or a little bit longer. Next slide. So there's 2 pieces to this. I think the consensus is really strongly coalescing around a goal to eliminate the fatal and serious injuries crashes, and then with a target year of 2045. But just want to make sure it's clear that the goal can be either to eliminate or to significantly reduce fatal and serious injuries. The context of that discussion in the past has been that even a 95% reduction kind of sends a message of tolerance and acceptance of fatal and serious injuries. And that is not the message that most people want to be able to send and would rather aspire to reach 0. We can go to the next slide. We can come back to the question about the target year and goal at the end of the discussion today. But so there are 5 key emphasis areas that have been identified that are inherent to the crashes in this region that result in fatal and serious injuries. We can go through the next slide, please. So rural crashes have a higher percentage of life-altering outcomes, and they account for 16% of all fatal and serious injuries in the region, based on that 5-year data set that was evaluated. Next slide. Bicyclists and pedestrians are overrepresented in the crash data. So there's a disparity there in the numbers of pedestrians and cyclists and their representation in the fatal and serious injuries. They represent 16% of those. When it comes to roadway types, it's the 4 and 5 lane roadways that are significantly elevated in those fatal and serious injury crashes. And there's 21% of those fatal and serious injuries that occur on those types of roadways, and they're only 4% of the total roadway network. So there's a real overrepresentation in that roadway type as well. Next slide. And motorcyclists are generally a smaller part of the traveling public, but they're accounting for 30% of the motorists' fatal and serious injuries in the region. So all motorized vehicles involved that have a fatal and serious injury outcome, 30% of those are motorcyclists. Next slide. And from the data that was evaluated, it's apparent that those areas within the region that have degrees of disadvantage, which is part of your equity evaluation, they're far overrepresented in the fatal and serious injury crashes. So 59% of all urban fatal serious injuries were in the equity areas where there are 4 or more degrees of disadvantage. Next item. So now we'll just take a look at some of the other high-level analysis outcomes. I want to talk about 2 different terms: high injury network and high risk network. And we've mapped both. So you'll see that visually as well across the region. The high injury network is based on data that identifies where crashes have happened. And applying safety projects to the high injury network it's reactive because we know where those have been happening. It's an opportunity to target projects and be more focused in on where you're going to have bigger impact. It can include high investment capital projects, or could include some lower cost modifications that sometimes fall under maintenance projects. The high risk network differs in that it is based on risk factors associated with roadway types and their design. So based on data sets, we can look at the risk factors that were associated with fatal and serious injuries, crashes, and we can map out other roadways that have characteristics that are very similar to that put those locations at risk. And some have told me that it's the roadways where we can almost say it's just a matter of time before a fatal or serious injury happens in that location based on their characteristics. That's an opportunity for more broad deployment of tactics for improving safety. And again, those could even include some lower cost investments. Next slide. So we mapped the high injury network, which includes all different modes of travel. And you can see how that network looks. Those that are, they're rated as high, and medium in terms of their injury frequencies. And this overlays motorcycle, motor vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle all together. And you can see that distribution. This data set, again, this is the high injury. It's based on where crashes have occurred. And this data set tends to be better to apply in a more urban area. It's not as good for looking at more rural context. In the next slide is our mapping of the high risk network, which the risk factors tend to be a better way of identifying riskier roadways in a rural area. So we did go forward with identifying a map where we have high risk factors. And you can see geographically, there's a bit of a different distribution between the high injury and the high risk. And we've been trying to be real conscious of the fact that we need to be thinking about regional distribution. We have a lot of different stakeholders here, and it will be most helpful if we can help stakeholders across the board identify where those risks are and where the opportunities for projects are. So next map, please. This map looks a little different. And what we've done is we've taken the highest 2 categories of the high risk network and the high injury network. Again, injury network is where injuries have occurred. The blue on this map is the high injury network. That's going to follow a little bit more of those urban type areas. And the high risk network is going to be more geographically spread. So this really helps to identify on a more regional basis, where are those potential project types? Where are those places that more focused intervention or investment could be considered to help make impact on reducing the fatal and serious injury outcomes within the region. Next slide. So I'll try to wrap this up. Let you know that what we've completed so far, I think we did cover that like on one of our first slides, but we're concurrently working on several pieces of the project right now, including that countermeasures toolbox, which is really going to be helpful for your practitioners, your street maintenance, engineering staff specifically. We're starting to develop some prioritization with this mapping that will help inform an implementation plan and program. We're just making some steps in that. I will assure you prioritization has not been decided at this point, but the maps are really helping to highlight those areas that need strong consideration. And then there will be a visualization toolkit, which will also be something that can help your practitioners, but also be used for communicating with your community members. Is there a next slide? Okay, so if we could come back to the target year and goal, Gunnar, you're in the room. It might be easiest to, if maybe you could help facilitate and see if there's any further discussion around that topic.
Does anyone not feel comfortable with the target of 0 deaths by 2045? Understanding that they don't fully know what the implementation or prioritization looks like.
I'm okay with it. But something else has come to my mind. Our population in the metro is continuing to increase. So by presumption, this will have more drivers, more vehicles, more pedestrians, more motorcycles. Saying every year we're going to reduce it by 5%. In fact, how many additional people are we adding to that mix that it may be a little more difficult to do than we think.
I mean, we're always adding users systems. I mean, again, it's a principle of we want to move in that direction. I know, kind of Matt, here about the DOT and federal. I mean, there's in that zero fatality program there for running for several years. It's just that effort, right? We're always going to move users. Good with that.
Sure. Do we know how many of those motorcyclists were not wearing a helmet?
I don't know that we have that data recorded in our data set. I can check with our analysts and see if they have that. You bring up, is it true that Iowa does not have a helmet law?
Correct.
Okay.
Building off that question, I'm trying to connect the dots on the 4-lane highway and speed, or if it's lack of guardrails or whatever. But you know, looking at those maps, it does seem like if it's four-way highways, but I'm just not sure why that might present such a dangerous combination. The road in and of itself, I think.
I know roadway departures, single vehicle crashes did come up in the data sets as well. So that I don't know if that's a guardrail issue or if it's even side rumble strips along the exterior that might be potential options for treating those. And speed certainly.
Speed is on the 4-lane speed the biggest factor, you think?
I don't know if that's the biggest factor, but it certainly is a significant factor because the faster the vehicle is going, the speed of the force of impact is going to be more significant, and that's what humans really can't respond very well to.
To that point, the helmet question with the bikes. Curious to know how e-bikes, scooters, and
pedestrian.
I'll just say, I mean, I agree, Doug, with your comment earlier, that if you save one life, you want to do what you can. And, whether it's 5% a year, 10% a year, I don't have enough context here to, really comment on whether 5 is right. Have we been reducing 2% already without this initiative, or are we on an increase of 5% per year? I don't have that. I assume that the folks that went through this study have gone through that analysis. I'm supportive of everything we can do to reduce. It feels like a little bit of a finger in there. Okay, 5%, 5 a year. Okay, you get 0.
I think
I don't have enough.
the percent is the goal, but I think if we implement changes to say just one line,
Yeah.
that will be enough to say where the direction we're moving. If it turns out to be 5%, that's great. If it's 3%, I don't think we're gonna run the risk of losing funding or anything like that from the government over not hitting our goals. But the fact that we can just say one line, we're focusing on a program and committing to try to get 0 will be the one. Yeah, other comments? All right, thank you for the presentation, and Dylan took a couple notes. We'll send you, and we'll try to get a couple answers of some additional breakdown of data.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have a presentation and then kind of note an optional vote. At exactly decided not to vote on because of the volume of information and the need for it to be able to be absorbed. And we're also going to just focus today, although it says governance and human capital plan, because of the amount of information, we're just going to focus on governance assessments today. Turn it over to Cap.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So we are going to review the governance insights report, and Dylan shared with me that you received it a little bit later than we had planned. So as we go through this, we've got noted in the PowerPoint presentation, the page numbers, so you can follow along with me as we talk, but everything, the high level notes are noted in the PowerPoint. Yes. Okay, so our goal today, and I'm going to move fairly quickly, so interrupt me if you want to dig a little bit deeper. My goal is to get to the end themes here, but we're going to talk about the draft report. We're going to discuss the findings, and the really important thing here is that I will say out of the gate, in designing this report, the goal was to bring you back recommendations when it came to governance insights. But what we realized in putting together all of the research is it didn't feel like it made sense to bring you action steps without having your input into what those action steps should be based on what we learned from the research. So our goal today is to be able to talk about the themes that elevated through the research, to have you help shape what the action steps should be moving forward based on what we learned. So goal today is discussion. For our next steps. Thanks, Gunnar. So catalyst for the work. I've got these notes here, but I'd actually like Dylan and Mayor Holm to help explain these just really quickly about why this project was so important. So Dylan, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. When I stepped into the interim role, particularly if you recall, I met with pretty much all the board members, and something that really stood out to me was just the theme of what's the role of policy committee, what's the role of executive committee, where do we fit into this, what are improvements can be made? And we'll talk about this maybe a couple of times throughout this process. But at least my thought is, I don't want to just sit back and say this is the way we've always done it, let's just keep doing it that way. Not to make changes for change's sake, but I want to ask the question. So this was really an opportunity. When I came in, I tasked me to hear the same thing during the executive director search, it just these things popping up. So this is just a good opportunity for us to sit back and look, big picture, where have we been, where are we going, what works, what doesn't work, what are opportunities? That's exciting for me, and I think we have to talk about it.
Coming in and being 3 years on the MPO with you background, coming in, coming into this, it was broken, it's very obvious broken. Communities have different wants and needs. The MPO tends to focus on the system instead of the MPO itself, and we're trying to turn the MPO into that organization that everyone can go to a different side of the needs. So this is the first step in what will be several. think cast over time, and she's gonna be involved here for quite a while, I think, based on what we're seeing, so. Yeah, looking forward to the presentation.
So again, as we talk about governance, we're not talking about voting, we're talking about function of the team. So, and the team that's sitting around this table, so. So how did we tackle this work? We did a ton of research. So starting with looking at how the MPO was actually formed and the steps of how we got here. Then we looked at best practice comparatives, and then we did a survey of the voting members. So historical overview really quickly. The organization was actually formed in 1983, started as the Des Moines Area Transportation Committee. Then in 1993, it did a restructure to the MPO itself and began hiring its own staff. And between 1998 and 2018, there were 6 more amendments to the original agreement. As a quick summary of those amendments, what you will see is the name change, addition of members, municipalities, counties, and other partners, expanding the purpose of the MPO, voting parameters, modernizing document language. But a couple of other key points that I think you need to recognize in the work of the MPO is growth in just the work itself. So when you started in 1983, and it started measuring, I have the data from 1991, $2 million is what we were managing in SCP funds, to 12 million in 2013 to nearly 19 million in 2024. And since 1983, nearly $500 million has been awarded, which is just staggering when you think about the life of the organization. So looking at all of the amendments, one of the appendices that we've added to the document, and we'll email this out after today's meeting.
To check.
Okay, we put together a really great spreadsheet that walks through every single amendment that's been made and captures what change happened to each agreement. So you'll be able to look at the spreadsheet. It's not in the paper copy of the document that you have right now. It took a little bit to go through each agreement and see each change. So we just finished this. So we'll email this after today's meeting, and then you can see it. So great summary there for you to take a look at and see each of the changes. And then taking a look at the best practice comparatives, there were 5 partners that we took a look at. MAPA, which is the Greater Omaha Council Bluffs area. We talked with MARC, the Mid-America Regional Council, which is the Kansas City region, the bi-state Kansas City region. We also talked with Metropolitan Orlando, which is Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. That encompasses Orlando and Kissimmee metropolitan areas. The Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission has Columbus as its major metropolitan area. And then we also talked with the Metro Waste Authority as a regional partner. All of these planning entities are a little bit different than the Des Moines area MPO, and they were selected for that purpose. So there were good comparatives from the work that's done, but also a little bit of different insight in what they added to the work, so we could look at innovations as well. So if you join me in the report on page 6, you can see all of the detail that goes with this, but at a high level, what we took away from the best practices. One high level note, they found in how they grew their organizations, the regional convening that they gained gave them an opportunity, because the dynamics of having multiple municipalities, counties, and other partners around the table, an ability to have one table for convening, consistency and process for those regional convenings, and an ability to build trust, which was really important. For their governance structures, especially, they were able to build inclusivities for, let me start over. For their governance structure, they were able to find effectiveness for inclusivity through the use of committees and engaging board members in the work. So sometimes that was different in one way through committees, but then other ways in the work. They also had the added benefit of knowing that membership in the regional planning organization is not always top of mind for those of you around the table. So talking about return of investment through their meetings and through other events is really important. Making the best use of time and having clear expectations of what your role is when you're here and when you're engaged in the work. Okay. Key themes in the conversations with our partners. Engagement oftentimes hinges on relationships and trust with the organization. In speaking with the executive directors, this factor was so important for them to have an ability to manage the tension in the members because they recognize the political nature of the work. So the executive directors talked a lot about their role is very much focused on relationship building and being able to spend time with the members and with the folks who participate in governance. So it allows them to manage the tensions and the dynamics. And then, of course, clear vision and strategy is very important as it aligns with the top bullet there for having alignment, discussion, common understanding, buy-in, and making sure that the why in the work is defined both for the folks around this table and for the team. And I share that note with you just as a reminder. The last strategic plan for the MPO was developed in 2017. And so that's kind of one of the next steps that's coming in the future here. Urban and rural considerations. So looking at the partners that we looked at, they all have urban and rural considerations or big community versus small community considerations. Advice they shared was focus on consensus and then recognizing, as you see this note of micro strategies, where they have found success is not everybody has to be part of every project. So being able to align partners around the table for work that makes sense, and then having the trust in each other to know that those conversations can happen and people aren't being left out. Showcasing the work, working hard on bringing investments back to everyone. Metro Orlando has kind of an unwritten policy that every year everybody gets at least their dues back in a project. And then celebrating their differences is very important. And then transparency and financial reporting and the role of the financial team is something that almost every organization talked about, and very important for trust in the organizations having the financials elevated. So innovative ideas, we asked every partner things that they do that they recognize in their work is innovative. MAPA has a tip fee. So in their transportation improvement program, they have a 1% fee that if you receive funding for transportation improvement program, you're required to match it with 1% of your own funding. And that goes into their general operating budget and helps them do other work supporting their operations. Mark really celebrates their financial practices, and they actually, in managing the financials of their organizations, adhere to the same practices as municipalities, so they're GFOA certified. Metro Orlando has a very strong committee system. And then the Metro Ohio program, they actually manage an intern program where they have close to 150 interns that they bring into their organization and then disperse through all of their partners. So you may need an intern for engineering in your city, and they manage that through their regional planning organization. And they shared a lot of times that their members around the table may not remember exactly how much funding they got for a specific transportation project, but they remember the interns. That's it. So Appendix B and this one is laying in front of you as well. We have a complete summary of all of the questions that we asked the partner organizations. There were some additional questions the executive committee asked us to follow up on. Those have been added to this document. So you can see who we talked to, the website, and all of the details that we gained from those questions as well. Okay. So stepping into the committee survey that we did of the voting members of the policy committee, all of the committee summary is on pages 7 through 12. And again, I'm going to roll through this pretty quickly. We received 19 responses for the survey. You can see the notes here. The primary components of the survey were around meeting logistics, the exec committee membership, committee considerations, and then there were some closing thoughts. What I will tell you as you look at the results of the survey and what is shared in your report, if there was a question where you could share your thoughts openly, in the summary, those thoughts are reflected word for word, verbatim. I did not change or modify any of the comments that were shared. In this summary and the PowerPoint, I've got it reflected in themes. So as you dig into the comments there, you'll just see the themes reflected here at a high level. Okay. So meeting logistics. This was one of the questions we came into. How are we feeling about our meeting structure? Definitely folks appreciate the hybrid version or hybrid option to attend. We validated that the current meeting date and time, the majority of folks appreciate where we're at. And feel the number of times the policy committee meets per year is appropriate to accomplish this. Talking about the executive committee is where things, we definitely have a few more questions where we can dig into a little bit deeper. There were 6 questions in total about the executive committee, and there were 2 points where I feel like we really achieved consensus. That we're structured appropriately and that we're doing the right work. So in the first question, you can see 59% of folks responded neutral, 35% of folks agreed, and about 6% of folks disagreed. I gave you consensus on that question because only 6% of folks disagreed. So I'm assuming the neutral folks, for the most part, must have agreed. And then in the second question, 58% of or 59% of folks that were doing the right work agree we're doing the right work. That is the one question where the policy committee gave the most expression of agreement, pure agreement. So clearly that was consensus. Now I'm just holding this. In the remaining questions, the work of the executive committee extends beyond, and you can see the following questions on the way down. This is where it gets a little bit harder to determine consensus. And the thing that I'll share with you, and I will allude to one of the pieces at the end of the report, is that there's a lot of ways that you can interpret neutral. So you can look at neutral as the satisfaction, but not hitting it out of the ballpark, or not enough information to weigh in to give you an agree or disagree. And then of course, it's just disengaged. And that's the challenge in really assessing these questions is I don't know how to answer what neutral means for those of you around the table, but that's clearly where the majority are sitting is in that neutral space. So I don't think it's a negative piece. I think we just have to understand from each other what that means. So as you look at these questions, but I'm not gonna dig into that discussion at this moment. If you're okay with that, I'm gonna keep going and then we'll come back. So we'll together. There were questions we asked about membership. So specifically what the benefits of membership are to the MPO. Definitely having a voice at the table, regional thinking, and attention to including partners in the discussion. These weren't all of the choices on that list that we provided, but these were the ones that received the majority responses. And then there was an opportunity to add comments to this question as well that you'll see in the report on page 9. We asked a question about what the obstacles are to membership and being in our work, and we certainly recognize the different issues for cities. 75% of respondents noted that, and competitions for funding changes the dynamics. What makes the MPO unique? What you see here, as I say, equal voice, regional planning and support, and nothing really. This was an open box question. So folks were able to share their thoughts freely. So these were the themes that elevated from those comments. So you see the equal voice with a question mark. The comments floated both ways. So there were comments that said, I feel I have an equal voice. And then there were comments that said, I don't really feel like I have an equal voice. So the question mark is there saying it came up as a topic, but but we don't agree that we have an equal voice. Definitely acknowledging the regional planning and support as a positive thing. And then the nothing really with an exclamation point is when we talk about the MPO being unique, there were those comments of nothing, I don't know, not applicable. I sit on other regional planning boards and this isn't different than the work that they do there. So it's a good question to think about, right? And then where can we improve? The comment themes were centered around member engagement, committee considerations, decision-making, and then there were comments that said, I don't have any suggestions about where we can improve. And then 2 more questions we asked in the survey, what you would like to have more access to, funding. And then these next bullet points are really important, particularly as you think about moving into strategic planning. Facilitation of intergovernmental conversations, technical support, development of plans, reports, and studies, and then public outreach. And those were the top majority of checkbox receivers there. And then lastly, committee considerations. You feel the MPO would benefit from a more robust committee structure. What's missing? 62.5% of folks said topic or project-based committees would add benefit. So I have to say this in 2 ways. The majority of folks said, yes, we would like topic or project-based committees. And then there were some follow-up comments that said no more meetings, please. So I'm acknowledging we received those comments, but the majority of people said we would like topic-based committees. So, and that's on pages 10 and 11. So in compiling all of this data, taking into account the survey, taking into account how the MPO has evolved and changed, taking into account what we learned from best practices, there really were some aligned themes that supported 2 kind of thought, trains of thought, I guess you could say. There were definitely some ideas or concepts to support governance, and then there are definitely some thoughts to support preparing the MPO for upcoming strategic planning. But I will say to you, asking the right questions has led to some more questions before we determine the right action to take. And what we really need from the policy committee as a whole is, as I shared the themes with you, do we have the right themes that we're thinking about? And then how do we collaborate on shaping our next steps? So here are the themes, and these are on page 12. Themes for shaping governance. Clearly, we've demonstrated that through best practices and through the survey, there's an interest in trying to figure out a more robust structure for committees. I think we need to understand, we validated that we've got the right shape for the executive committee and they're doing the right work. But I think there's some reflection the executive committee can do in how they engage the policy committee or share information with the policy committee to be more effective, kind of bringing those things together. And then how do we engage, shape, or build topic or project-based committees as one aligned priority. Member engagement is the next one. So how do we increase connectivity between all of you with regard to regional transportation planning? So I've just got some ideas here. Could include discussion about more critical topics, different kinds of engagement in work, and then that point going back to additional services that folks kind of mentioned, facilitating intergovernmental conversations. And then this member satisfaction piece, really leaning into what does neutral mean to the MPO? And is this an opportunity to be better? And I'm really careful in asking that question because it isn't about that the work that the MPO is doing isn't the right work or isn't the I just don't think we've asked the question of, and I keep thinking of Doug and like the last MPO policy committee meeting where we talked about the pavement assessment plan, and is that even an option, right? That's what I mean by that. Is there an opportunity to do some of those things and we don't even know that they exist, right? I don't know. And then just what are the expectations and are we meeting them? And when was the last time we asked that question? So align priorities for governance. And then to support strategic planning, I think before you go into strategic planning, there's an opportunity to revisit the MPO vision, mission, and guiding principles for the pieces that I noted there. But it was actually through conversation with Dylan that the recognition was made that the mission that really exists for the MPO today is defined to support the system and not the organization. And so when you think about all of this work, it's hard to align yourselves as a governing body if your mission aligns solely to the system. So how do you align as a team if you don't have a mission that aligns you to the organization? And then shaping the possibilities. When you look at what the partner organizations are doing or how they think about how they approach the work, how do you stay relevant and effective for all of your members? And just kind of the lens point earlier, the Metro has grown and changed so much, and has how you look at the work changed and grown to match that. So celebrate your difference, ask the critical questions, and adapt as needed, or just validate that what you're doing are the right things to be doing. So those were the themes. Okay, so I am pitching the ball to you. How do these themes resonate with you? I'm getting all of that research. And you're all welcome to say, I feel neutral. Maybe let me ask this question differently. As you heard me share all of that, were there points where you were like, yes, I have felt that way sometimes, or I can relate to what was just shared?
Yes, I think there's a lot of valuable information came out of the survey from my perspective. Much the structure itself was okay. The people were pretty much in agreement with how things operate. But maybe, again, getting back to, there are things we can improve on, and having those committees that actually go out and do some of this work and bring information back to the rest of us, especially people that have interest in particular topics. So I think there's a lot of good work we can do, and I know Dylan's trying to figure out what kinds of things can we change within the organization to improve ourselves. And I think that many of us in this room want to see us succeed and be successful and cater to the needs of all, if you will, of the communities, and stretch these dollars as far as we can across all of the programs. So I think we're headed in the right direction, but we're going to have to put some more, I'll say, meat on the bones to actually make those things a reality.
I think the other, we spend a lot of time discussing mission and vision, all that. I think it's kind of alarming for us to get Cass going into is our mission and vision is focused on the system. We each access different roads and streets, interstates, all that. So that's kind of the one where to say we have some dysfunctionality is because our mission and vision is aligned to the MPO itself and making the region stronger system. So that point along, right there, the flag is around getting some goal setting and all that. It is we want to move that, neutral. We want to see that go higher to yes, we are. People want committees, committee up, but they want more meetings. So I think a lot of work, all the good work is done. moving forward. There's a lot of information I know presented. We tried to get it out a little bit earlier, but we just IT glitches. Again, we're going to get it. But I mentioned earlier, the executives just kind of, we accepted it and moved it on the policy, so you know, we have an optional vote here later if you guys want, but you know, there's a lot of information. I think there's a lot of reflection, thought that needs to go before we. Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off and get more, keep going.
Well, I'm happy to throw some thoughts out here, and Dylan and I haven't talked about this, but recognizing you didn't have a chance to see the report as much as we wanted you to before being here today, and recognizing it seems like everybody's still kind of processing it. If you want to share, so a couple of options. You can share your feedback with me between now and the next policy committee meeting or executive committee meeting. And give me some insight as to how we can craft next steps to move forward, as to what you would like to see as next steps. And we can build that in. Or we could organize potentially some small group discussions at the next policy committee meeting where we could break in and talk about each one of the. I'm throwing that idea out as a first time, something different at the policy committee meeting.
I think we have a special side of the normal policy.
To talk about.
That's another meeting.
But if one solely focused on the breakout, we would have to focus solely on moving this forward.
Or if there's consensus on the themes, I can put together some ideas and bring them back to you for consideration. But it takes the step out of you designing what's best for you.
I pretty much agree with the themes that are there. They were identified by who pushed forward, so.
Everyone good with the themes? Online, anyone have kind of talking about moving forward here with the themes that Kathy brought forward? Looking for any comments that those all members online may have. Does that matter, anybody here? Maybe that's both work, Kathy. We've got, we can delay vote and Kate's gonna reach out to you and in the next month, you'll further develop teams. And then we'll look at those, next month and have strong objections to that.
I just think, yeah, we talked about it as executive. Honestly, we don't have too many more people outside of executive are here today. So probably a little more time for everybody to take a look at it. People, especially people who aren't here, able to participate.
I'll come back with an eight newly developed committees and a bi-weekly committee meetings.
Off the chart.
There you go.
Fly.
You got it.
All right, over your meeting.
Thank you all.
Unless there is an objection, we will skip the optional vote and move on to item 8. All right, moving on to item 8, the report and vote on the MPO population adjustment and joint resolution circuit.
Thank you. So earlier this year, the MPO expanded its boundaries to areas that grown only and so on. So as part of this expansion, the Iowa DOT asked us to update our population numbers so they can update funding for this. So at a minimum, the MPO boundary has to include designated urban areas, and so the Iowa DOT uses that geography as a baseline. But the MPO end server has slightly extended beyond these geographies, and hence, so MPO that web server has looked at the population numbers. So starting with the 2020 populations in the urban areas, that 547,000. Then moving beyond that to MPO's updated boundary in gray, that's about a population of 583,000. And so the difference between the area in green and gray is about 35.
So MPO staff worked with surplus staff to develop these numbers, and surplus staff has no objections to this methodology or to the numbers. So the next step, once the MPO approves these numbers in the joint resolution, it will then go over to SERPA, who will then do the same. And then once both organizations have approved this document, it will go over to the MPOT, where these numbers will then be used to update the book. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have, and MPO staff.
Entertain a motion.
So move.
Second. Moved and seconded, any further discussion? None, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Dee. Up next, we have a report and optional vote on the carbon reduction program funding process. And over to Deb.
Thank you. Before I get into this, I want to preface it by saying a couple of things. One, this has generated a lot of discussion the last couple of months. So bear with me. I know it's been a long meeting, but I'm going to walk through this information because I want to make sure that I have a pretty solid base and understanding of the background that we've gone through up to this point and just understanding what this program is. The second thing, kind of building off the discussion we just had past, is the executive committee, when they spoke about this, really was deliberate in saying they didn't want to make a recommendation. They wanted to be this group that makes the final decision. And I'll speak to the process that got us to this point, but just keep in mind as we go through this and explain this, that ultimately it's up to this group of what we did. A couple different options were presented at the end, but decision. So that said, I'll dig into this. As I noted, we've been talking about the carbon reduction program for a little while. It was established, the infrastructure bill was created in 2021. However, the details, the funding formulas, everything wasn't established until later last year. When we were discussing this a little last year, the policy committee said, let's hold off until we get further along with our long-range plan. There might be strategic priorities we want to tackle that emerge. But so we didn't act right away when we wanted to let things. As you might recall, back in April, there was a decision made to award DART a large portion of the funding. Jumping back to the previous conversation, there was this discussion of as we applied to a charging and fueling infrastructure bill that would fund EV charging stations. One idea we had was if we don't end up getting that grant, perhaps these funds could be used. That was another reason we held off. We found out early spring that we didn't get those funds. Not right around the time that the funding subcommittee was deliberating on projects. The funding subcommittee was looking at DART, the carbon reduction program was there. Now without a use, the charging infrastructure wasn't something that we ultimately decided to go forward with. And so that money was moved. And at that time, the policy committee said, directed staff to go back, come up with a process to award the remaining funds, which would be about $500 million, make that available to all members to do it as quickly. So in May, we went to the policy committee, or went to the technical committee. We had the Iowa DOT representative who's been working on the carbon reduction strategy at the state level come in and present the carbon reduction strategy, go over eligible uses. So some slides coming up here, what was presented at that time. The tech committee voted to create a subcommittee to dig into this. Jump to what they got but first, let's go to the next slide. Within the carbon reduction strategy and the carbon reduction funding, there are really a couple of on the left side, you see objectives. And obviously, the overall objective is to reduce carbon emissions, but there's also other objectives that the federal government wants to accomplish. That's safety, equity, and so on. I will say those are common themes for all funding that the USDOT has. That's just part of the administration's what they're putting out there. But that is something to keep in mind. And then there's a number of different uses of these funding. IWT broke them up into the 5 categories. They're multimodal, so forth. But there are a couple of just key things that they want to do, which is reduce single occupancy vehicles, look at different construction techniques, look at different. That's kind of the 3 things that the federal government said. So then if you go on to the next slide, we've got a couple of different strategies that can go in there. So again, multimodal, this includes public transportation, which we've already provided funding towards, but it also includes bicycle pedestrians, phase three projects, anything to really reduce single occupancy vehicles. On the right, you see operational efficiency. This can be things like signal timing, using technologies, using other forms of roundabouts, anything that might be like that, but without doing a lot of construction, you can still move the system a little more. The other thing around the next slide, so we've got alternative fuels. That's pretty self-explanatory what that can mean. I will note though, I kind of glossed over this, we had this idea of potentially funding electric vehicle charging. I would DOT came back up and said, that's not probably a good idea. It's just a very onerous process. Where funding comes from, what the federal requirements would be, cybersecurity requirements, procurement requirements, a lot of kind of stuff. Probably local jurisdiction. So while we could choose to go in that direction, very much. You also have construction materials and practices that can be funded. And then there's other things such as freight efficiencies, looking at the interaction with transportation and land use. So those are the 5 main categories. On these next couple of slides, you can see those 5 categories, how they align with the 3 different US DOT guidelines, like I said, et cetera. And then there's some sample projects of what. All of these were put into the DOT's carbon reduction strategy. I will note the carbon reduction strategy was created in consultation with the MPO in Iowa. We were involved in some meetings. However, it's up to the MPO, that's up to the MPO whether we want, how much and to what extent we want to adhere to the carbon. Next slide, we'll kind of jump back into the process of where we're at. The carbon reduction fundings, the carbon reduction program subcommittees, the debt committee, yeah, they met in mid-May, and they kind of came at this from a couple of different ways. One was if our goal is to make sure all the other communities have access to this, can we just sub-allocate the funding by population and call it a day? We can't do that. We checked, but it was worth a check. They said if that's not possible, though, let's just keep this as general as possible. Let me back up. One thing that as staff we went into this thinking is should be targeted to something specific. Like we said at the very beginning, we were waiting until the long-range plan was further along. We just talked about safety. Do we want to dovetail this with safety and carbon reduction project? That's something we said, let's just keep it as general as possible. We don't know what needs are going to be out communities. Let's just keep it very basic. And let's also use carbon reduction as the main focus. Iowa DOT has the ICAP program, the Iowa Clean Air Attainment Program, so they've already practiced that a little bit. So we looked into their criteria, and that was one of them. And they also thought to do this on a separate practice. So let's do this before the SDG process. That way, if something isn't funded through this, it can then qualify through the additional cycle. If you go to the next slide, like I said, we can't sub-allocate. So what we do is we put together an application process. And rather than using the ICAP programs methodology, which really puts the onus back on the communities, the US DOT has a carbon reduction. 18 different calculators, 18 different project types, rating, trails, signal timing, all sorts of different things. It's all already established, be like easy. Roll out this tool, and that would be our. So that was discussed. The CRP funding subcommittee, CRT subcommittee. Go to the next slide. This would be the timeline. If we were to approve this today or pretty soon here, we could get the application soon and then wrap up by November. The funding, the SDG funding side starts December. We would achieve that goal. Now, if you go to the next slide. The subcommittee reviewed those draft materials. There were a couple of questions. Again, can all communities apply for these funds? Yes, all the communities would be eligible for the funds as long as the project is applied to the can't sub-allocate them. And then there was a question of have we run any sample projects through this time? And the answer to that is no, we had not. The materials that we have from the previous application for SDG funds just don't have the correct information for us. Now, we could do that if that's desired, but we have not. All that said, the subcommittee recommended to move that forward. Tech committee met earlier this month, had a good discussion. They voted to move this onto the executive committee. There was one no vote though. And really I think the crux of that concern was just using carbon, that tool of carbon reduction to make the decision. Should there be other things? Executive committee had a really robust conversation about this. Like I said, ultimately they did not take a vote. They wanted to be this group. However, one thing that similar thing came up, should there be other factors to consider? And so one thing that we did discuss at that meeting was, do we add something to the application to ask what else does this project? What does it do for safety? That's an easy thing we can do. We actually have already. So to wrap up, I know I went through that kind of quickly, but I'm trying to respect the time here. We've got a couple different options on this. We've got the original approach that the subcommittee put forward and the tech committee endorsed. We've got the consideration of, do we ask additional questions, or there might be something completely different that this group wants to do. Like I said, this is for you to take from here. We want to enable you to make decisions. So I'll stop talking there. If there's questions, comments, happy to try to address it.
Based on the information we received, I'm going to make an early motion with the intent of spurring further conversation that in accordance with the Iowa Department of Transportation 2024 Carbon Reduction Plan, Carbon Reduction Program, U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration memorandum implementation guidance, we adopt the 5 categories of eligible funding for carbon reduction program of multimodal transportation, operational efficiency, construction. In each category is a list of eligible projects and programs for communities to consider making applications. As the Iowa Department of Transportation guidance recognizes each community to focus on strategies and priorities within their respective communities. Further, that the assigned percentages of funding to each broad funding category as follows: 60% multimodal transportation, which has already received 30% operational efficiency. Nothing to alternative fuels is what we just learned. 5% construction, 5% to other, which may be some innovative project. Any funding category that receives limited or no participation, the remaining funding percentage in that category will be distributed across the remaining funding category. Further, that the applications be grouped together by funding category, review, scoring, and ranking using the U.S. carbon reduction calculators is one element. The consideration of U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, Carbon Reduction Program memorandum guidance. Use of federal aid highway formula. Establishing priorities of safety, ADA consideration, equity, project elements that proactively address racial equity, workforce development, economic development, climate change. This motion lays out a very similar process how we've handled our STPG funding based on our required grant program.
With the motion here. Second, we want to move it forward.
Could, Chair, if I could, say a clarification that those percentages were just simply goals.
Yes. And I'm open to any interpretation or change. I just wanted to get the conversation started by putting some.
I have some concern about not knowing the type applications that might come forward to then hit the number. Not that we might not end up right where you said, and I do like the 0%. So probably close. I would want to ask though, also, if I could, the 5.5 million that's available, the notion on the table is to allocate all of that now. We do have time.
The DOT does want us to start allocating the funds. We obviously have already allocated this. Some of those funds, we get about $1.4 million per year, so this would be funds for 25, 28, I believe.
Right, the 28 is what I was kind of focused on. There's a couple of years on the back end
And
out there, but it's
And the other caveat to that is that this program was created with the infrastructure bill was 26. So some of those further out years could drop off. I mean, we want to be, just like all of our funding, we always make that clear that we're worthy of funding, we have the right, something drastic kind of Congress and funding. It's not guaranteed. That's it. That's what.
I guess wherever we land, my thought or suggestion would be that in this instance, with the way this program is designed, it's okay to not spend all the money in this first application process. So I would just hope that that's something that we could consider once we see what action is applied.
The member from Pleasant Hill does have a motion. If there's a second, if there's no second, move on.
I have a clarification. I don't know much about this DOT, what criteria they utilize. If they utilize the 5 criteria that you're out, then I don't know that that's to be necessary.
Are you talking the calculator?
Yeah.
It's mentioned, the calculator is just a way to produce an output of what is the carbon reduction across different projects. So that way you can compare a bus purchase to a traffic signal. You know, and you kind of getting on an equal level of what, yeah, that thing.
Okay, so they're not considering any of these other categories, like alternative fuels, construction. Or
No, the calculators are built to look at the carbon reduction of various projects that would address pretty much all of those price projects.
And the blanket overall is looking at safety and those kind of things. Not, they have to assign a specific score, but it doesn't provide a safety option as a part of that. So it's not just necessarily all the carbon reduction. Does that project also include a safety factor, some equity factor to it?
I would also, if I could, a question that came up during the executive committee, and this also through all the committees we've had actually. With the calculator, are we just going to take the top most one that reduces carbon the best and rank them and fund them like that? And that's something we could do, but traditionally that's not what that's source for the funding. Something, you know, for the SDG funds, it's a consideration. It's not say that was our intent with this as well. So.
All right, then keep this discussion to a minimum here because we're in between a motion and a second. If there is no second, it will die and we move back to the original subcommittee and committee recommendation.
Chair, one more clarification, if I could, sorry. So your motion is to include funding subcommittee, score those and make a recommendation for funding.
Pretty much how they have done business. Yes.
Yes.
And that's what that would be either.
And I'm assuming staff would do the ranking score piece to some extent and then pass that on. And the funding committee would have overall responsibility of evaluation. What are we going to fund? Some may not be funded. What levels they would be funded. And then bring that recommendation back on the policy. Approval like the other grant funds.
I think they work the same way, just when the motion has been made, there will be this percentage targets. The way that the tech committee moving forward is the targets.
Given that, I would smile to the second.
Then move in second. Now we can have some discussion on
These percentages, how are they applied and how did you come up with the percent that you put in your motion?
For me, it's arbitrary. It's more about trying to get the discussion started. But it had a lot to do with, on the multimodal. I know some communities are looking at some trail things. I mean, there was piece in there specifically, the trails is a project that's eligible. Trying to get people out of their motor vehicles, those kinds of things. Obviously, the alternative fuel thing is a very complicated process. That's why you didn't do anything there. Looking at the overall, just thinking of how our communities are probably most of it's gonna be in that multimodal operation efficiency, signalization programs, something we've already taken on that I'm sure communities are looking at. To get them initiated to reduce some of that traffic congestion, could be around population, change how they stop sign and traffic signal. That's where I see most of the communities in my mind probably wanting to spend that money. And then construction or other innovative projects probably less. My guess is we may see nothing from the innovative projects. And if that's the case, then that money would be reprogrammed into the other areas where we did get applications.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that when I appreciate this, but you've read all this out, I haven't seen anything in writing. Personally, have a motion like that, I don't see any compelling reason to act on this.
That's exactly what Dale and I were just.
If we could get a motion like that in writing that could be distributed, that we can take action on next.
Dale and I were just discussing potentially creating a subcommittee.
More meetings.
And having that by September, and then also making sure that this is developed with best practices in mind. So I think probably the money's been there since 21. I know we stuck with how we distributed last year, but I think another month delay, make sure we get this right and there's nothing been overlooked and the appropriate eyes are on that. I would think that we should probably table this. So,
I guess I'll like to just vocalize my thought on the direction of this. I'm not so sure about the percentage allocation. That seems a little messy to me. I would much prefer some type of wording where it's crafted that's consistent with driving the goals here forward, but also has a component of review of this DOT submission for a metric of actual carbon reduction. I believe this is the goal, and I would trust the subcommittee to use this as the guiding light to prioritize their projects and also consider equity amongst the region. I'm not sure about that.
I think what you're saying there, Doug, is that we would vote the council members or the member of Pleasant Hills motion down and return to the original recommendation of the subcommittee, which is what Dylan laid out in his presentation. Would be more comfortable.
I'm more comfortable with that. I think that when we first talked about this exec level, there was certainly some that had the interpretation that it was all going to go back to the scoring component of how much carbon is actually reduced. My fear, if we do that, is all the money is going to go in one or two places. And it's going to exclude the dissemination of the funds from projects. I think we want to maintain that and be intentional about finding different projects that hit on different things. So as long as that's clear within the process going forward with the subcommittee.
So that's something he wants to go back to
The floor is the board and the policy board, so there is a motion, so continue the discussion, ultimately in the end, we're going to need to do something. So, obviously,
So can I ask a quick question? So on the original, you put a committee together to study this. They came back with a recommendation. And the recommendation is to use an existing tool that is designed to determine the effectiveness of a factor, will be the factor, it's a factor. And so we know at least we'll have that metric. That makes perfect sense. You're suggesting there was discussion at the executive committee about some qualitative question that would go along with that. What else is it about this project? So I agree, we want the money to be spread out among the communities who haven't already had a chance to access the previous. So I think that's the goal. I'm supportive of that. So I think there's a really good start with that recommendation from the committee along with that qualitative component. The SDBG funding subcommittee also would take a look at that, and then it goes to executive, and then it goes to policy committee. So if you want a subcommittee, you do a subcommittee. I think there's already a good starting point
that's come out of the group that looked at it through technical. And as long as there's some assurance that the SDBG funding subcommittee, the direction is, the score is a component, it's not the be all end all. This last round of funding, the score was considered more than it had been historically for those who've been on SDBG for a while. So I think as long as that's clear, I would be perfectly comfortable just taking the recommendation along with you or executive, but adding that qualitative component and running it through the process. It still has multiple layers, and hopefully this body will make the final decision. I wouldn't overcomplicate. It's my 2 cents.
There's a motion and second, so right now we'll be voting on the council member, or the member of the motion and the additional criteria. And I believe we will have to do a roll call vote starting in reverse order.
Windsor Heights, Mike Jones.
No.
West Moines, Tom Hadden. Mr. Hadden, are you still online? West Des Moines, Ms. McKinney.
No.
Warren County, Mark Snell. City of Riverdale, Mr. Andrew.
No.
Cole County, Mr. Van Wert. Supervisor Van Wert, are you there? Polk City, Mr. Walters. Pleasant Hill, Mr. Murray.
Yes.
City of Des Moines, Mr. Hankins.
No.
City of Des Moines, Mr. Anderson.
No.
City of Des Moines, Mr. Sanders.
Yes.
Dart, Ms. Wanky.
I'll abstain.
Devin Markley. Carlisle.
Aye.
I'm sorry, say again.
Aye.
Mr. Elrod, Father Ann.
No.
Mr. Jones, City of Ankeny.
No.
Mr. Holmes, City of Ankeny.
No.
The noes have it.
All right, motion fails. Back to the carbon reduction funding process, with entertain a motion.
Sure. I'll move to accept submission with the qualitative information. So
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? So will there not be any further subcommittee or there's a further subcommittee that's going to pass through? Hey, Dylan, if you need to probably report out. Just adding these, public gone now.
I would add, if we still have to develop, we have a draft application, we will review that. Others are interested in seeing that. Happy to share that, happy to collaborate with anybody on that. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I'm not suggesting.
Okay. No, I have the same question.
Covered. Any other additional discussion or questions related to this? Seeing none, based on the previous vote, we'll go back to a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries. Up next is our director report, Irvin Bill.
Thank you for your patience here. And obviously, you've been doing a lot of work with with CAS and the governance assessment, so I won't belabor that. I have been working to schedule one-on-one meetings with folks, so I know I've had a couple of those that haven't heard from me yet. So I'm trying not to get overwhelmed all at once. Also, as part of my job offer and having this position, I get the opportunity to have coaching. Yeah, audit of 360 do a survey from others, so I will probably be putting something out. Well, we did kind of introduce that. Yeah. It's good. We kind of skipped over this today and talk about it next month, but the human capital plan. Also introduced Edison Williamson as our new planner, started back in August. This is his first policy meeting. Everyone here is on the executive team. And then finally, as we've been talking about, this is probably all the most strategic plans. Start thinking about that. Start thinking about strategic direction. We're also wrapping up a long range plan here in a couple of months. Over the next couple of months, we'll really start getting that hard. And then we talked about this in previous months, but we'll really start. Something else you'll see coming soon is a transportation economic budget development. On this. Questions about
Questions, Bill? Yeah, other non-action items of interest in committee.
I have two quick ones. First, if you will take 1 minute of your time, and we'll take that. We are updating our Title VI documentation. We'll be bringing that back to you next month. It is going to be largely unchanged from the Title VI documentation we did 3 years ago. One of the questions we need to ask and answer is the gender and racial makeup of, or ethnicity makeup of the committee members. So if you would please take 30 seconds to fill this out, you can leave it with me or at your spot, and we'll just be submitting that anonymously as part of our Title VI documentation. I am going to share a link in the chat, so anyone online can take that. The other thing I will share real quick is I know you've all been in here and see our really great blue MPO apparel. We're going to make the opportunity available for all of you to rock your MPO attire. So reach out to us, we can get you the link to order. But one to operate there. That's it.
I would add that that exact guy had mentioned that for terms of Dylan's employment agreement, we were to do a 6-month review, which is being by August 31st. In light of the 360 review with the executive coaching, I'm going to just allow that to be the review unless someone has strong objections. We previously discussed a different possibility that exactly this team would like to do executive coaching. Hearing no objection, we will consider that to be his, that 360 review to be a 6-month interval, which has nothing tied to it other than just kind of checking. It will be that annual review. There's more weight. Nothing else before us. We have our next meeting is September 26th at 4 p.m. Thank you everyone for the time today. We are adjourned.
Please note that the 26th is a week later.